fluctuate, but he can get off a block, plays through the double team. And remember, late this year, he had those back spasms, kind of played through that. He was at least on the field, trying to get on the field to play. Really set a great example for his teammates there. Hard-nosed, very relentless here on the sack. I think if you look at Jason Peter, he also, because of that size situation, now 292, and his quickness, which you see right there against Brock Huard, gives you the flexibility. He can play a defensive tackle spot, a nose tackle spot, a defensive tackle spot, and a 3-4 for Carolina, and it gives him a lot of flexibility if, in fact, his weight can remain in that 290 range.
Well, Peter will be playing, the Carolina Panthers hope, next to Sean Gilbert. Now, that deal has not yet been made because Washington and Carolina, frankly, got into a Hatfield and McCoy situation.
Yeah.
So now it can be made after this draft. Not made yet, but Sean Gilbert signed a sheet, or will have, with Carolina. Let's go to Mark Malone with some information about Sean Gilbert and the Panthers. Mark?
Well, Chris, I've talked to Dom Capers, and he said, in fact, as you mentioned the Sean Gilbert situation, they traded their 43rd pick for the number 1 pick in 2000 from the Miami Dolphins. Now, that'll allow them to give 2 number 1s, one in 99 and one in 2000, to the Washington Redskins for Sean Gilbert. In fact, what will happen is that offer sheet will be signed probably sometime on Monday. Capers feels confident that that's going to get done. They've done a lot of movement in the free agent market. They've had 9 free agents signed, most of those on defense. Gilbert will make it 10, and now that they've got Jason Peter, a guy that can replace Cragen inside at the nose tackle, they really feel that they've got that defense back in order. Boomer?
All right, Mark, thank you. Of course, that's one that we've been watching for a couple of weeks. Sean Gilbert had as many tackles last year as Mel, Joe, and I combined. When he plays, he's pretty good. I mean, remember, he was drafted first round very high, and his second year with the Rams, when they were still in Los Angeles, and now that puts that back some, he had double-figure sacks. So they really are getting a guy that hasn't sacked very high figures in about 4 years. But is that a big gamble to get a player like this? He's still young, guys.
I don't really think it's a gamble. What I think it's a calculated risk, however, because he's been out of football for a year. They're going to be paying an awful lot of money for him, and they're going to have to be giving up some draft picks for him. I mean, this player has got to produce. At least you know you're getting a known quantity, though.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with you.
No, you don't agree with anybody.
Well, no, I do actually. At time to time, I do. But I think the year off doesn't really hurt him that much. I think that he's okay. He's rested. Any injuries, you know what it's like. A guy takes a year off, all of a sudden you feel rejuvenated, you feel energized. I think the money he's going to get is certainly going to energize him. Now you add Peters as another young defensive tackle. Carolina, all of a sudden, in one fell swoop, winds up solving their interior problems, much like the Redskins did with Stubblefield and Wilkins.
Well, I think it's great for him, you know, and certainly with the money that he's making. But I also think that, you know, they're mortgaging a pretty hefty future, draft situation for them. So, you know, this is they're going for the championship. That's what they want.
Well, Boomer, he's got a lot to prove. I think as an athlete last year, everybody kind of blamed Sean Gilbert. Said, hey, if Sean Gilbert was in there, maybe the Washington Redskins are a playoff team. So I think when you look at Sean, he's coming in, he's fresh, maybe not rusty. Who knows? We'll see. But he's certainly in that defensive structure. They were old last year. They had a lot of age up front, weren't very active. And now when you add a Jason Peter and a Sean Gilbert into the mix, it's got to upgrade that front seven.
Let's go up to a guy that knows a little bit about defense, our Tom Jackson on Sean Gilbert after shaking a little bit of the rust off. However, Seattle is on the clock. Are they about to make a pick? Is that what we're doing? We're going to go to Tom. Somebody give me some help here. Seattle's pick will probably be Anthony Simmons, linebacker from Clemson. And as we go up to... No, we're not going to go up to Tom. How about that? We're going to go to break. You know what? I saw 3 different coverages.
I'd like a
2 minutes ago. We're going to call a timeout. We'll be right back.
The wrong nuts.
Starting this fall, the NFL on ESPN Radio. Live up-to-the-minute stats and scores as they happen from around the league. Well, not starting this fall. We've been doing that for years. Hear interviews from the stars that made the plays happen after it's over. NFL on ESPN Radio starting the first Sunday in September at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So if we have to call an audible on TV, you can go to ESPN Radio, basically. Seattle is on the clock. They got about $1.50 to go. Let's go up to Green Bay and get some words of wisdom from our own Hank Goldberg on where Dennis Erickson and company are going. Hank?
Well, I talked with Dennis Boomer. Anthony Simmons, a linebacker from Clemson, is a guy he covets, outside linebacker. He thinks he can go inside. Remember, they picked up Darren Smith as a free agent and Chad Brown last year. That gave him a lot of speed at linebacker. Back to you, Boomer.
All right, Hank, thank you. The pick is up to the commissioner, and let's zero in with Paul Tagliabue.
With the 15th pick in the first round, the Seattle Seahawks select linebacker from Clemson, Anthony Simmons.
You know, Mel, I mean, if we're scoring at home, it's going to be tough to beat the Swami. I mean, we've gone kind of right down the list here, haven't we?
It's been very predictable, Chris, and I think you look at Anthony Simmons, you see the eyes of a middle linebacker, a guy that really could play outside linebacker as well. In their system, he'll give a challenge, certainly Dean Wells, coming off of a pretty good year. I think when you look at this kid, I think you see a guy very active, really one of the all-time leaders in tackles in ACC history, pursues, he's active, he's very alert, really like a cat. Every time you look up and you watch film, you study film, number 41 is on the scene big time. He's really all over the field. He's only that 6 feet tall, about 230 pounds, but tremendously instinctive, and a guy that, like I say, productivity in the ACC throughout his career was just unbelievable.
Playmaker, playmaker, playmaker. Joe, let's plug him into Seattle.
Well, Seattle defensively, I think, was very strong as it was. I mean, you take a look at the front. You got Sinclair, you got Adams, you got Cortez Kennedy. You pick up Sally Amua last year. Now you add this kind of speed to linebacker. All of a sudden, you've got yourself a defense that is as fast and as quick as anybody in football. I mean, Boomer, defensively is really where they've improved a lot in the last 2 years.
Well, you know, I've always looked at Seattle kind of like an enigma. You know, they have all this talent there. They have one of the best all-time quarterbacks to come along, barring you, Joe, of course. But I will say this, that they have the talent to compete. There's no question about it. They're obviously in a very talented division with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Denver Broncos. And you never know what's going to happen with Oakland. And you would think that San Diego is going to give them a little trouble. But this team is a team that I think
slowly. They always have a tough September.
This is definitely a playoff caliber team in terms of their talent. Now, obviously, again, you have to look at their schedule. You have to look at who they're playing against.
Is this the year, though?
This will be a year that they will definitely make the playoffs. Whether they're Super Bowl caliber, that's going to come down to Dennis Erickson and his coaching staff.
So let me ask you this. They really don't have a huge need area. They took Anthony Simmons. He'll be protected by those two big tackles. What are they missing to get to the next level?
Well, to me, it comes all back to the coaching staff. You know, they have to get them ready to come out of the chute, and they got to be fired up as soon as the season starts. They cannot afford a slow start.
You know who's going to be fired up? Game one, Ricky Waters. Game one at Philadelphia.
Right.
Well, that ought to fire them up a little bit.
Absolutely.
To try and run the ball. Tennessee and then Cincinnati are our next two picks. Let's go to Andrea Kramer in Jacksonville for some insight. Andrea.
Well, Chris, I think that the talk in the Oiler draft room is going something like this. The two players that they want are both there. Wide receiver Kevin Dyson from Utah, who Jeff Fisher said would be an immediate starter opposite Yancey Thigpen, and linebacker Brian Simmons from North Carolina, who Fisher said is a difference maker and would be better than any linebacker they currently have. But since both players they want are still there, they are also talking about trading down, talking to the 5 teams below them, if they believe that they can still get that player. Remember, Floyd Reese has traded down the past 2 years and got the guy that he wanted. Back to you, Boomer.
All right, Andrea, thank you very much. And now we have the Tennessee Tuxedos. And the reason we call them that is they're about to play in their 3rd stadium in 3 years. Their deal with Vanderbilt is done. They'll play in their 4th stadium in 4 years. Next year in '99, when their permanent home in Nashville is built and they're ready to go. Boomer Esiason, you know these Oilers team at 8-8, and certainly with Eddie George, they can dictate a little bit on offense. He's the real deal. They need to give Steve McNair as much help as possible. Is this the year that McNair takes off, or is he still a ways to go? What do you think?
Well, you know, I think we've seen steady improvement from him, but it needs to take it up another level if this wants to be a playoff team, and they're close. They have a pretty good defense. Jeff Fisher always puts together a good defensive team. I think Dyson's the guy here because of, you know, he'll be a nice combination with Yancey Thigpen. You put Dyson in there, and now all of a sudden you have Eddie George. That's a pretty formidable offensive firepower.
Their wide receivers were the most disappointing part of that football team last year. They felt like McNair has reached a level to be able to play and be an efficient quarterback at still a very young age, but they didn't get the production near what they needed out of the wide receiving corps. You've got Eddie George, so you're going to be able to control the running game. Now all of a sudden you need some place to be able to go down the field. That seems to be the general theme of football teams that want to take it to the next level. Teams like the Oilers, like the Giants, that say we have to now compete against Green Bay and Denver, the teams that can put points on the board. The only way they're going to do it is by throwing the ball down the field.
And when I look at teams like this and I look at their young quarterbacks, now is the time that these young quarterbacks have to start playing to the level of their expectations. I mean, you know, these are first-round draft choices. I look at, you know, what Steve did last year. He was 52%. He was about 2,600 passing yards, 14 TDs. you know, he's got the great scrambling ability. Obviously,